Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are setting the coordinates for somewhere hot, somewhere humid, and somewhere incredibly complex. We are going to Brazil.
And not just the Brazil of postcards. We are going to the Brazil of the soul.
Right. We're looking at a figure who is, well, he's a paradox wrapped in a riddle, seasoned with, I don't know, cilantro and dende oil.
That's a very Bahian way to put it.
We're talking about a man who started his career documenting the most brutal, violent, muddy realities of cocoa plantations. And somehow he ended up being the guy who defined the smiling celebration of an entire nation.
It's a massive ideological and literary journey. We are talking about Jorge Amado. And to simply call him a writer feels like a drastic undersell.
Oh, completely.
He's the giant of Brazilian modernism.
A giant is right. I was looking at the stats before we started recording, and they are just staggering.
They really are.
His work has been translated into, what, 49 languages?
49 languages, yeah. He's published in 55 countries.
It's unbelievable. If you, listening right now, have a mental image of Brazil, that specific smell of cloves, the taste of cinnamon, the heat of Bahia, the complex, beautiful mix of cultures, there's a very, very good chance that image was planted in your head by Jorge Amado.
Precisely. He is the lens through which much of the world learned to see Brazil. But what makes this deep dive so fascinating to me isn't just his success.
No.
It's the tension at the absolute center of his life. Because today, we think of Amado as this grandfatherly storyteller, right?
Yeah, the guy who wrote these colorful, sensuous books like Gabriela, Clove, and Cinnamon, the cozy national treasure.
Exactly, the cozy national treasure. But if you dig into the sources, if you go back to the beginning, you find a man who was a fierce communist militant.
A militant who was exiled, a man whose books were publicly burned in a city square.
By the military police, no less.
Right, and yet this same man ends up winning the French Legion of Honor. He's getting multiple Nobel Prize nominations, and he becomes this beloved icon who collects toy frogs.
The frogs. We have to talk about the frogs later.
We absolutely have to. So that's our mission today. We want to figure out how he pulled off this magic trick.
Yeah.
How do you go from being a dangerous enemy of the state to being the smiling voice of the country? How do you reconcile the violent lands with the celebration?
It is the central question of his legacy.
Yeah.
And to understand it, we can't start with fame. We can't start with Gabriela. We have to start with the mud.
You got to go back.
We have to go to the source of the violence.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack his roots. So Jorge Amado was born on August 10th, 1912. The location is a farm in a place called Ferradas, near the city of Itabuna in the state of Bahia. So paint the picture for us. When we say Bahia in 1912, what are we looking at?
Well, today we think of Bahia as, the vibrant center of Afro-Brazilian culture, music, tourism. But the specific region where Amado was born, the cocoa growing region, was something else entirely. It was the Wild West.
Literally, like gunslingers and everything.
Culturally and violently, yes. This is the era of the violent land, which, of course, later became the title of one of his most famous books. It was a rush economy.
Oh.
Think of the gold rush, but instead of gold, it's cocoa. And instead of the dry California hills, it's the dense, sweltering Atlantic rainforest. It's muddy, it's hot, it's brutal.
And where there's a resource rush, there are usually guns.
Exactly. The region was controlled by Coronese colonels. Now, don't let the title fool you. These weren't necessarily military men.
Right. It's more like a land baron or a warlord.
Precisely. They were powerful, wealthy landowners who commanded private militias. They were the law. They controlled the politics, the police, and all the land through brute force.
So Amado is born into this environment, but he's not born a peasant, right? His father, João Amado de Faria, was a landowner himself.
Correct, and that's a crucial detail. Jorge was born on the side of power. He was the son of a fazendero, a farm owner, a coronel in a sense. But, and this is the key to his entire psychology, he wasn't shielded from the horror of it.
He saw it firsthand.
He saw it. The sources are very specific here. They mention that even as a child, he witnessed misery and people living in almost enslaved conditions.
Almost enslaved. That phrase is so heavy. You have to remember, slavery in Brazil was only abolished in 1888.
Just 24 years before he was born. I mean, that's a single generation. The structures of slavery, the economic dependence, the brutality, the absolute lack of rights were still fully intact on these plantations. It was serfdom, basically.
So he's a little boy looking out the window of the big house, and he's seeing the workers in the mud. He's seeing the violence used to maintain his own family's lifestyle.
Can you imagine what that does to a child's mind? It creates a fissure in his identity. You often hear about writers who discover social justice in, like, a university classroom, right?
Yeah, they read a book and get angry.
Right, they read a theory. For Amado, it wasn't theoretical, it was visceral. It was right there in the dirt. It was the air he breathed.
He didn't need to read Marx to know that the system was fundamentally unfair. He just had to look outside.
Precisely. Those childhood observations planted the seeds.
Oh.
You cannot understand his later political militancy, his joining the Communist Party, without understanding that he saw the human cost of that cocoa wealth from day one.
It's the foundation.
It formed the bedrock of the social realism that defined his entire early career. He wasn't making up stories about the poor, he was reporting on what he saw.
Now, he didn't stay on that farm forever, and the reason for the family's move is, well, it's intense. It feels almost biblical.
A plague.
The smallpox epidemic.
Yes. When he was just 1 year old, a massive smallpox epidemic swept through the region. It was devastating. The family was forced to flee the farm and move to the coastal city of Ilhéus to escape it.
And Elias becomes his home base, right? For the rest of his life, he considers himself a citizen of that city.
He does. Ilhéus is central to his identity and, of course, to many of his novels, like Gabriela.
Yeah.
But he didn't stay there for his education.
No, he was sent to the big city Salvador, the capital of Bahia. And this is where we start to see that this wasn't a normal kid. I mean, looking at the timeline, he seems incredibly precocious.
Precocious is putting it mildly. By the time he's attending high school in Salvador, he's what, 14?
14 years old.
At 14, I was trying to figure out how to, ride a bike without falling over.
Exactly. He was already deeply embedded in the literary scene. He was helping found something called the Rebels Academy.
The Rebels Academy. It's such a perfect romantic name for a group of young modernists, isn't it?
It really is.
It shows that he was already looking to shake things up. He wasn't interested in the status quo or the dusty old academics. He wanted to create a literature that reflected the Brazil he knew, the messy, real, mixed-race Brazil.
And he didn't wait around for permission to start publishing.
No. He published his first novel, The Country of Carnival, in 1931. He was only 18 years old.
18, that is just...
Okay.
It's wild.
And just 2 years later, in 1933, he publishes Keko Coco. That second novel really increased his popularity because it went right back to those roots we talked about. It was a raw, unflinching look at the lives of the plantation workers.
And his personal life was moving just as fast. The sources say he married his first wife, Matilda Garcia Rosa, and had his first daughter, Lila, that same year.
So by the time he's 21, he's a best-selling author, a husband, a father, and a literary rebel.
It's a lifetime of experience packed into just a few years. But there was technically a plan B, right? He was in Rio de Janeiro to study something a bit more traditional.
Right, the classic parental expectation. Law school.
Of course.
He attended the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro Faculty of Law. But, and this is a classic Amado detail, he never actually became a practicing lawyer.
The law degree was just a backdrop, a cover.
It was a prop, a good excuse. It got him to Rio, which was the political and cultural capital of Brazil at the time. But his real job, his true calling, was activism and writing.
And this is where we get into the militant writer phase of his life, because you have to remember the political context of Brazil in the 1930s.
It's everything. You can't separate his work from the politics of the era.
This is the era of Getulio Vargas.
Correct. The Vargas regime. And let's just say Vargas was a complex figure, a populist dictator.
A nationalist.
Very much so. And he had absolutely no patience for leftist agitators. Amado's activities, his writing, his associations, they put him directly in the crosshairs of the dictatorship.
And when we say crosshairs, we aren't speaking metaphorically. He was arrested for the first time in 1935.
He was, for his political activities. But then comes 1937. This is a moment that I think defines a generation of writers under authoritarianism. It's the moment of the book burning.
I always stop cold when I read about book burnings. It feels so archaic, like something from the Middle Ages. But this was the 20th century. Imagine being 25 years old. You've poured your soul into these novels about the poor, about the struggles of your region. And the government piles them up in a public square in Salvador, your city, and sets them on fire.
808 copies of his books were burned by the military police. It's an act of symbolic violence. It's an attempt to erase the ideas. But as history shows us time and time again, book burnings often have the opposite effect.
They backfire.
Massively. They validate the author.
How so?
Well, they send a message. They say, this person is dangerous, this person has power, we're afraid of what this person is writing. By burning the books, the Vargas regime was admitting that Jorge Amado was a threat.
It's the ultimate bad review, but also the ultimate compliment.
In a dark way, yes. His works were also banned in Portugal, which was under the Salazar dictatorship. But interestingly, while Brazil was burning his books, Europe is starting to pay attention.
Right. He published a book called Jubiabá, and it got great reviews in France. I read that even Albert Camus, the Nobel Prize winner, reviewed it enthusiastically.
So you have this incredible dichotomy. At home, he is a criminal, a subversive element whose books are literally fuel for a bonfire. Abroad, he is being hailed as a significant new voice in world literature.
And he wasn't just a writer with some leftist sympathies, he was all in. He was a card-carrying member of the Brazilian Communist Party, the PCB, from 1932.
He was a militant. There's no other word for it. In the early 40s, he even edited a literary supplement for a political newspaper. But the pressure from the government just became too much.
So he had to get out.
From 1941 to 1942, he was forced into exile. He had to go to Argentina and Uruguay to stay safe.
It's the classic James Bond writer, life on the run, crossing borders, living out of suitcases. But he comes back, and here's the part that just blew my mind when I was reading up on this.
What's that?
He doesn't just come back to write. He comes back to run for office.
And he wins.
He wins.
In 1945, there was a brief opening, a democratic window, after the fall of Vargas's Estado Novo. Amado ran for the National Constituent Assembly as a representative of the Communist Party.
As a communist.
As open communist. And get this, he received more votes than any other candidate in the state of São Paulo.
That is staggering. A communist writer getting the most votes in the country's industrial powerhouse. It really shows that despite the censorship, or maybe because of it, the people loved him.
They saw him as their voice.
Yeah.
And his time in office wasn't just symbolic. He actually left a legislative legacy. He was the author of a law that is still in effect today.
What was it?
He signed a law granting freedom of religious faith.
Okay, let's pause on that. You have a communist, and strictly speaking, communists are atheists. Religion is the opium of the masses, right?
That's the classic line.
So why is a communist championing a law for religious freedom? It seems like a total contradiction.
It is a beautiful contradiction, isn't it? But if you look closer, it makes perfect sense for Amado. It foreshadows his entire later career and his deep fascination with Brazilian culture.
Because Brazilian culture is religious culture.
Exactly. Specifically, the Afro-Brazilian religions like Candomblé and Umbanda. These religions were constantly persecuted by the police, by the Catholic establishment. They were seen as primitive or subversive.
So he saw it as a freedom issue.
He understood that for the people he wrote about, the working class of Bahia, their faith was essential. It was their culture, their identity, their resistance. You couldn't be a free person if you weren't free to practice your religion. So the atheists fought for the right to pray.
It's a humanist stance over a dogmatic one. He put the people before the party line.
I think so. But his political career was cut short. That democratic window slammed shut pretty quickly.
Yeah, it did. The Cold War was heating up. In 1947, the Communist Party was declared illegal again in Brazil.
And its members were persecuted and arrested. Amado, as a high-profile former deputy, was a major target. He had to run.
Exile round 2.
And this one was longer. Went to France first, from 1948 to 1950. Imagine that scene. He's in Paris, rubbing shoulders with Sartre and Picasso. He's part of the post-war intellectual scene.
But even that didn't last.
No. The paranoia of the Cold War catches up with him there, too. He was expelled from France.
He was too hot to handle even for the French.
So he went behind the Iron Curtain. He eventually settled in Czechoslovakia with his second wife, the writer Zélia Gattai. They lived there from 1950 to 1952.
And during this time, he's traveling the Soviet bloc. He goes to the Soviet Union. He even wins the Stalin Peace Prize in 1951.
Which, looking back, is a heavy title to carry. A complicated award, to say the least.
Very heavy, especially with what we know now about Stalin.
Of course. And while he is accepting prizes in Moscow, the CIA is watching him. Documents released in 2016 confirmed that he was under surveillance during this period. They considered him a major cultural asset for the communists in Latin America.
So let's just recap. We have Jorge Amado, international spy target, communist deputy exile, Stalin Prize winner. It's a very serious, very intense, very political life. If he had died then, in the early 50s, he would be remembered as a political revolutionary who wrote protest novels.
Absolutely. A footnote in the history of socialist realism.
Yeah.
But he didn't die. He returned to Brazil, and then 1954 happens.
It's a great shift.
When he comes back to Brazil in 54, everything changes. He makes a conscious decision to abandon active political life.
He steps back.
He leaves the Communist Party a year later, in 1955. He's had enough.
Why? Was he disillusioned with what he saw in the Soviet Union after Stalin's death? Or did he just want to write?
The sources suggest it was a mix of both. The revelations about Stalinism certainly played a part, but primarily I think he wanted to dedicate himself solely to literature. He was tired of the dogma. He was tired of having to write books that fit a political checklist.
He wanted freedom.
He wanted artistic freedom, and the literature itself changed dramatically. He stopped writing strict social realism, books that are purely about the class struggle and the misery, and he pivoted.
This is the Gabriella moment.
Exactly. In 1958, he publishes Gabriella, Clove, and Cinnamon. And it is a revelation. It's a phenomenon. Jean-Paul Sartre, of all people, called it the best example of a folk novel.
It's a totally different vibe from his earlier work. Instead of just misery and exploitation, now we have humor. We have sensuality. We have food. We have these incredibly strong, unforgettable female characters.
He moves toward what he called a smiling celebration of Bahaian traditions. He is still writing about the people, the poor, the mixed-race population, but he is looking at their joy.
Right.
He's looking at their love lives, their cooking, their gossip, their resilience. This is the era that gives us Dona Flor and her two husbands and Teresa Batista, home from the wars. This is the Amado the world falls in love with.
But not everyone was happy about this celebration at first, and this story is honestly hilarious to me.
It is iconic.
Gabriela is set in Ilhéus, his hometown, the city he loved, but when the book came out, the locals were scandalized.
Scandalized.
Mortified.
Was it the politics? Were they mad he wasn't a communist anymore? No, it was the sex. Specifically, his depiction of the sexual customs of the town. He wasn't hiding the affairs, the desires, the messiness of relationships. He painted the town exactly as he saw it, warts and all.
And the local high society did not appreciate the portrait.
Not at all. The society of 1950s Brazil, especially in the provinces, was still very conservative, very Catholic on the surface.
So the Cornets were okay with him writing about cocoa prices, but not about their mistresses.
Precisely. The sources say he literally could not enter the city of Ilhéus for years because of threats.
That is wild. So he went from being persecuted by the national government for being a communist to being threatened by his own neighbors for being too spicy.
Essentially, yes. Locals felt he had offended the morality of the city's women. It really highlights this incredible tension between a writer's job, which is to tell the truth about human behavior, and a community's desire to maintain a proper image.
He was a political exile, and then he was a moral exile from his own home.
But despite the local backlash, this new style is what launched him into the stratosphere globally. This is where he builds the Amado universe. And at the core of that universe is the idea of a mestizo Brazil.
Mestizo meaning mixed race.
Yes. He wasn't just writing about white settlers or black workers in isolation. He was writing about the mixing, the blending of races, cultures, languages, and crucially, religions. His work is defined by religious syncretism.
That brings us back to that contradiction we talked about earlier. The atheist communist who fights for religious freedom. Later in life, he received an honorary title in Candomblé, right?
He did. He was given the honorary title of Oba de Xango. Xango is the Orixa, or deity of justice. It shows the deep respect the religious community had for him.
Because he took their beliefs seriously.
He validated their culture and high literature. He treated the Orixas, the gods of Candomblé, with the same reverence, the same narrative weight that European writers treated the Greek gods. For him, they were real forces in the lives of his characters.
I want to run through a few of his key works just to give our listeners a sense of the incredible breadth here. We mentioned The Violent Land. That's the cocoa struggle, the mud and blood of his youth.
Pure social realism. A brutal, powerful book.
Then we have Captains of the Sands from 1937.
Captains of the Sands is a masterpiece of his early period. It depicts the life of a gang of street children in Salvador. It's heartbreaking, but it has so much heart. It shows the solidarity among these kids who have nothing. The book was actually banned and burned.
Of course it was. Then we have The Shift, Dona Flor and her two husbands in 1966.
Which brings in magic, realism, and humor. The premise itself is just genius.
Yeah.
A woman, Dona Flor, marries a respectable, boring pharmacist after her wild, gambling, passionate first husband dies.
She chooses stability.
She does. But she misses the passion. She misses the chaos. So her desire literally summons the ghost of her first husband back. And she lives with the both of them, one in the streets, one in the sheets, so to speak.
It's the ultimate have your pick and eat it too fantasy.
But it's also a metaphor for Brazil, isn't it?
Yeah.
You need the order, and you need the chaos. You need the respectable pharmacist, and you need the passionate gambler. You can't have one without the other.
And then there's Tieta in 1977, another epic focused on a strong female protagonist returning to her hometown, and one with a great title, The Double Death of Quincus Waterbrae.
A fantastic, hilarious exploration of mortality and humor. It's about a respectable man who dies to his family and becomes a bohemian drunk named Quincus Waterbrae. When he actually dies, his respectable family tries to give him a proper burial.
But his friends have other plans.
His bohemian friends steal the corpse to take him out for one last party. And in a way, he dies a second, much more fitting death at sea during a storm.
It sounds like Weekend at Bernie's, but with profound literary merit.
Laughs come out. It has a bit more depth, I'd say, but yes. What ties all these together, from the street kids to the ghost husbands, is his tone. He depicts a cheerful, optimistic country.
And this is so important. He doesn't ignore the poverty. He doesn't whitewash the problems.
No, and that is the magic trick. He shows the deep social and economic differences. He never lets you forget the inequality, but he refuses to strip the poor of their joy. He refuses to paint them only as victims.
That's it.
They are vibrant, complex people who love and eat and dance and gossip and fight and scheme.
I love that. He refused to let poverty be their only defining characteristic. He gave them agency and, more importantly, joy.
Precisely.
Now, we promised some oddities, and I have been waiting patiently to get to this. We have to talk about the frogs.
The frogs.
Jorge Amado, serious literary giant, Nobel contender, former congressman, was a frog collector.
He was a lifelong frog enthusiast.
Right.
But to be clear, not live ones. He collected frog-themed souvenirs.
Like little ceramic frogs for the garden.
Ceramic, wood, glass, crystal, everything. Frogs from all over the world. Whenever he or Zelia traveled, they'd bring one back. He had a huge collection. If you go to his house in Salvador today, which is a museum, you can still see them on display in the garden and all over the house.
I just love the image of this man who sat in the Constituent Assembly and debated the future of the nation, coming home and, arranging his little toy frogs.
It adds such a human, whimsical touch. It softens that communist militant image significantly, doesn't it?
Completely. And the scientific community actually recognized this passion, which is the best part of the story.
Oh, it's wonderful. In 2017, a new species of frog was discovered in Bahia.
Please tell me they named it after him.
They did. It is called Philidites emodoi. The scientists who discovered it noted in their paper that not only was it found in the region he wrote about, but they knew about his collection. So now, there is a real frog hopping around the Atlantic rainforest carrying his name.
That is better than a Nobel Prize, in my opinion. A species is forever.
Well, speaking of the Nobel Prize, that is a sore spot for some Amado fans.
He was nominated, right?
Many times. The Nobel records are sealed for 50 years, but the released archives show he was nominated at least 7 consecutive times from 1967 to 1973, and probably more after that.
And he never won.
He never won the Nobel. There's always speculation why. Maybe he was seen as too popular, too readable. Maybe the early communism spooked the committee. Maybe the genre shift confused them. Who knows? However, he cleaned up almost everywhere else.
What are some of the big ones he did win?
He won the Camões Prize in 1994, which is the most prestigious award for the Portuguese language.
Yeah.
Sort of the Booker Prize for Portuguese. He won the International Nonino Prize in Italy.
Yeah.
He got honorary doctorates from universities in Israel, France, Italy, just all over the world.
And the French Legion of Honor?
Yes, awarded by President Francois Mitterrand himself. This is the same country that expelled him as a dangerous communist a few decades earlier.
What a turnaround.
It really shows how he outlasted his critics. The governments that once banned him eventually had to give him medals.
He also became a fixture of the Brazilian establishment in his later years. He occupied the 23rd chair of the Brazilian Academy of Letters from 1961 until his death.
A true immortal, as they're called. And there's a sweet detail about that chair. When a member of the Academy dies, there is usually a fierce competition and vote for who takes the empty seat.
Right.
When Amado died in 2001, who do you think took his place?
I have a feeling I know.
His wife, Zelia Gattai. She was elected to replace him in the Academy.
That is beautiful. It kept the seat in the family. A literary dynasty.
It did. And speaking of family, he had some other interesting connections. His cousin was Vera Clouzot.
Wait, the actress from Diabolique?
The one and only. The star of Diabolique and The Wages of Fear.
Great.
Classic French cinema. And his cousin Gilberto Amado was a well-known politician and writer himself. Creativity and public service really ran in the blood.
So let's look at the final chapter of his life. He lived a long, full life.
He did. He lived to be 88. But his final years were marked by health struggles. He suffered from diabetes and had serious heart and lung issues.
He passed away on August 6, 2001, just 4 days shy of his 89th birthday.
In Salvador.
Yeah.
He died in the city he loved and immortalized. And in a fitting tribute, his ashes weren't put in a cold mausoleum or a cemetery.
No.
They were spread in the garden of his house under a mango tree.
Wow. Cementing his connection to the land he wrote about right to the very end.
Exactly. He returned to the soil of Bahia.
And the honors kept coming even after he was gone.
They did. He received the Order of Cultural Merit posthumously. And the Jorge Amado Foundation continues to operate in Pelourinho, the historic center of Salvador. It's a living museum that preserves his estate and promotes Bahian culture.
It's a pilgrimage site for readers.
Absolutely. So if we look back at this whole journey, we started with this angry young man in the Rebels Academy fighting against the system.
Yeah.
We saw him burned in effigy, exiled, hunted by the police. And we ended with this smiling grandfather figure, a meritorious citizen of freedom and social justice.
It's a remarkable arc, and I think the key takeaway for me is that his greatest political act wasn't his time in Parliament. It wasn't the laws he signed.
I agree completely. What was it, do you think?
It was his insistence on portrayal. He insisted on portraying the Brazilian people, specifically the mixed-race, working-class people of Bahia, as complex, valuable, and above all, capable of joy.
He refused to let them be invisible.
And he refused to let them be just statistics of misery. He didn't just want the world to pity them. He wanted the world to love them.
That is a powerful distinction. Pity versus love.
Yeah.
And in doing so, he really did define the soul of a nation for the rest of the world.
It raises a provocative thought for us to maybe leave with you, the listeners. We often think you have to choose, right? You're either a serious activist or a popular entertainer. We think social critique has to be dry and angry and, well, violent, like his early books. But Amado did both. He started with the violence, but he ended up with the celebration.
He did. He seduced the world with the scent of cloves and cinnamon, and once he had their attention, he showed them the reality of Brazil, good and bad.
So maybe effective change doesn't always require violence in the text. Maybe sometimes you catch more flies with honey, or in this case with muquica and carnival. Did he achieve more by celebrating the culture than he did by just denouncing the system?
I think he would have argued yes. He found a more powerful and maybe more human way to tell the truth.
So do yourself a favor. Go pick up a copy of Gabriela, Clove and Cinnamon, or Dona Flor and Her Two Husbands. Step into that world. See the Brazil that Jorge Amado built.
You won't regret it.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you on the next one.